Hi everyone, Jimmy here and welcome to the Coerver Coaching Podcast. This pod is designed for grassroots coaches who are serious about developing their skills and making a positive impact on their players. Our cause on our podcast is to provide you, the grassroots coaches, with advice that can really help you improve your players' creativity, skills and confidence. Each week we'll bring you a special guest who will share their unique experience and insight from the world of football. From practical coaching tips to inspiring stories, our conversations will be tailored to our guest strengths, ensuring you gain valuable knowledge you can apply directly to your coaching, your players and your team. Let's get started. So, Sab, great to have you on the podcast. I don't
know if we've started. I just started talking. I was like, this is just...
I don't know either, but I think we have. Sab, welcome to our podcast. It's great to have you on. Great to see you as well.
Yeah.
Quick intro for our audience. And our audience, Sab, just to fill you in, is mostly grassroots coaches, parents and players. So the whole premise of what we're trying to do here is provide sort of pro insight and pro tips to the grassroots.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so cool to have you on today, because you've got obviously a brilliant foot in both camps. We were chatting before the pod. You've had obviously a brilliant experience working in the grassroots side of things. And now you're working with Spurs in England and, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of where your career can go. So why don't we start right at the beginning, Sab? How did your journey start in coaching?
Yeah. I
guess via playing, and you'll tell us a bit about that. And then how did you end up becoming an England coach?
Do you know what? It's the way I started. I played when I was a kid. My dad is sport mad, specifically football, but you go home and he will have every sport on TV all the time. So we just grew up with that, and sport always came first. He played everything throughout school. He's one of them where he'll just pick up a racket or anything and he's good at it. So we always had him, and we would play cricket in the living room and break things, but football was always the main one. And I have my older sister who played a lot, left footer, unbelievable, and I've got a younger sister who just doesn't care about sport. But we just used to play in the park and in the cage. I mean, women's football was so different at that time that we just used to play at school, but you were so used to playing with the boys. And that's just how I grew up. So it was always playing with the boys in the park, random kids. Can I play? Can I join in this game? And whatever it was. So like very different feel to how things are now. You go back to cage football. You go back to just trying to meg everybody, you know, and just have a good time on the ball. But I never played for a team. My first ever experience of joining a team was when I was 16. And I'd never really played 11-a-side because I'd only played at school and with the boys and at the park. And it's mainly 5 or 7-a-side. That my first experience and the way they trained at this club, because it was grassroots, they'd give you like 5-a-sides. So I showed up and I was like, I am really good. I'm so up for this. My first ever 11-a-side game as a player, they go, what position are you? And I went, striker, just because I score all the goals with the boys, and because you know that's just how it worked. Like if you scored loads of goals, I'm a striker. I had no idea what I was doing. It was like a deer in headlights. Pitch was massive. Everyone's just like, the ball's just in the air. The ball's not at my feet. What do I do if the ball's not at my feet? And I just didn't get it. And I think I tried it for a couple of months. I really enjoyed training because it was small-sided, but the games I just couldn't get my head around. And I really hit this point of, I'm clearly not good at football, and I felt like that took a lot for me to go, if I'm not good at it, I can't play it. And that was it. So I stopped playing. My sister carried on. She played at uni and all sorts. I think for her, she was good, but there was no real opportunity to make it a career. We saw the likes of Rachel Yankee at the WSL, and those are the main names, but you didn't really ever consider it. And also, like, it just wasn't something that happened in our area. So she just carried on playing. I stopped, didn't play at uni. And then I got to a point where I finished uni and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do in terms of career. You know, you sort of getting by. So my sister at the time, my older sister, was in Dubai. So as soon as I graduated, my family was there briefly, and she was out there on her own, and I finished uni and ran straight over and like knocked on her door and I said, can I just stay here for a bit? And she was like, yeah, of course you can. But she was still playing for fun. And she pulled me in. She goes, you want to go play a 7-a-side? And I was like, yeah, cool. It's been years, but I just enjoyed it. And I remember going, and I was so nervous going, I wonder if I can even kick a ball. But we just played. And after that, I played every friendly I could find, to the point where somebody came up to me and was like, do you want to play in the women's league? And I said, there's no way. Because I remember that last experience I had. I said, there's no way I'm good enough. They said, no, just like there's a trial game. All you got to do is play. And I said, yeah, cool. So I went to it, and I was telling my sister, because she was already playing in the league. And she said, you have to go to the trial game because that's how it works. Now, I didn't realise that the trial game meant that all the coaches, all the captains of both leagues would come and watch, and they pick. And I was like, that's quite intimidating, right? Because, so I'm just there playing. I went in as a number 9. I was like, I'm a striker. I'm so not a striker. And anyone who knows me just goes, you're so far from a number 9. You can't stay away from the ball. And I remember playing, and we finished, and somebody came up to me and goes, you've been chosen. And I went, this is it. And they were like, your first pick. And I went, stop it. So I got introduced to the coach and the captain that I'd have. So after that, I went out and went to see some of the boys. And I remember telling them, I said, I'm first pick. And they go, do you know what that means? And I said, no. They go, it's the American system. You've gone to bottom of the league. And I went, no, I haven't. They go, that's how it works. That's why they give bottom.
The draft system.
The draft system.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how. We don't do an American system in anywhere. And I was like, nah. And I went to training. I went, just out of curiosity, where are we in the league? They go, bottom of the league. You're our first pick. And they go, we really need to score some goals.
No pressure.
So that's why we needed a striker. And I went, right. But it's the best thing that could have happened because suddenly, the confidence and then I just got to play. And I had some really good people around me. And then we struggled that season. We struggled the next season, and then suddenly we started to rebuild. I started to have more of an input in what we're doing. But basically, just as I started this process of getting back into football, I'd taken a job that I hated. Yeah. Couldn't handle being in an office. And one of my mates who knew me from school was like, well, you've always been about football. Why you ever stopped that, I don't know, but you're playing it now. Why don't you coach or do PE? And I was like, you can't just do things like that. And I was like, I definitely don't want to do PE because I only like football. And then I approached a couple of academies and just said, look, I'm playing, I'm from England. And they just thought, she's playing and she's from England. Guess what? Badged up, experienced. And I remember getting offered a trial at one of the grassroots academies, and they were like, we'll just give you 3 age groups, put on a session for each of them, and we'll talk from there. And what I've delivered there, do you know when you think back at some of the stuff that you've delivered over time and you're like, I would never do that now. But I did it, and they sat with me after. They go, we really like you. And I went, They go, no, we just assume that you're from England. You've done this before. And you know when you're like, I should say something. And then part of me's like, but they like me.
But Sab, your enthusiasm, your natural enthusiasm, and you're obviously a great communicator, right? These are qualities. The football stuff is, especially at the younger age group, sometimes secondary. Can you communicate? Can you connect?
Yeah.
Can you inspire and excite young people?
Yeah.
And you could do that for football. You could do it for cooking or reading or whatever it is. If you've got those qualities innate, which must have come from your childhood and your education and your parents.
I was just so shocked. Yeah. And they were like, we'll start you off with 10 sessions a week. And I went, 10 sessions a week isn't bad. But then in 2 weeks' time, after 2 weeks, they went, do you want to do 20 a week? And I went, yeah, cool. But then once that academy offered me hours, every other academy was doing it because they were like, well, you've been checked. I didn't have a level 1. Didn't never coach. The first bit of coaching I was receiving was currently playing. But it was just so mad because I was like, what sessions am I putting on? But it's similar to, when we talk about players need 10,000 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I went from never really doing something before to doing it 20 times a week. And I think that for a year, the difference in that 1 year of coaching for me and what I had around me was, because it was out in Dubai, there was all these guys who had been at Premier League academies and stuff like that. So they were at the end of there because they were like, we've done everything. Now we're just enjoying an easier life. So, but they had every badge under the sun, and I'd spend so much time with them on the pitch. I'd set up mine here and they'd be there. And I'm like, what are you doing today? Because we all had the same topic. What are you doing today? Oh, we're doing this. And they all and I was one of the only, there's not a lot of female coaches now, but I was definitely the only female coach at the time there. And then, I just started picking up as much as I could.
That's so interesting. So you began to get the reps, you began to get the experience, working at grassroots, and we'll talk about this grassroots pro experience that you've had. But I would assume that working with mixed ability players, players with mixed concentration levels as well, would be a little bit more demanding sometimes than working with pro players at pro clubs that obviously their focus is there, the quality is there, they're all at the same level. So you must have learned a lot about how to manage a group in that way. And that probably also helped you from a pro perspective too.
Oh, 100%. I still stand by it that some of the hardest hours were grassroots.
Yeah.
Where you have to do every job. It's mad now, like with academy, you're like, oh, well, my session starts at this time, but my players aren't going to come to me because I've already planned for PPC to have them for the warm-up and specifically do these things.
Sure.
And then I've got my assistant coach doing a specific technical, and then I come in and so sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, I just want to coach. Just like, get me the players in. Yeah. But it's mad. But at grassroots, you do everything. I used to run the warm-ups. I had a point where I coached an adult team, like a university team. We didn't have anyone doing the warm-up. I didn't have an assistant coach. So I'd be running from doing the warm-ups to then running over and setting up the technical and doing all these things. And like you said, you're managing people who are using football for a number of reasons. Not every kid. And for me, I think initially, because I cared so much about playing, I was like, surely you all just want to win and make it pro. That has to be why you play football. Like, why else? I mean, football's great, but when you win, it's even better. And, you know, like, but then there were some kids who were like, I enjoy kicking the ball about, and then that's it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that must be nice, because I ruined football for myself because all I wanted to do was win and get to, do you know what I mean? Because you do, but when you don't have that and you just play to enjoy the game, that's like a different level of, like, appreciation.
How did you approach that, Sab? How did you approach that whole mixed thing? Like, where you've got different motivations, different interests of the kids. What can you give our audience, probably of grassroots coaches, some tips on basically how to manage a group of mixed, diverse interests?
I think for me, and I'll talk about those first early years of coaching, which I think at that point I didn't have any experience, and I didn't have a lot of confidence, I'll be honest, in terms of what I was setting up, what I was delivering, what I was saying. Yeah. I knew, like, you know, we all kind of know the basics. You play, you watch so much football, you've grown up around it, you know what you're trying to achieve, and you've all got a certain style that you're looking for. But because I didn't have the actual detail and like the things that I was trying to say, and you're still learning, I really... What mattered to me, and I think why I had that success early on with the players of mixed abilities and stuff, is I knew the boys, I knew the girls that I was coaching to the point where they liked me, they'd bought into me. So even if I set up something that was horrific, they didn't even know, they were just there to have a good time. So I think for me, the environment that I was creating was because I didn't need all the football knowledge to do that. Yeah. And what I've found now is that's the same thing I rely on. I could know everything under the sun. I could have every badge. I might be saying all the right things, but if the players haven't bought into the environment and who I am and what I'm trying to give them back, and the understanding of why you're here and what I'm trying to put on, they don't buy into it. But when they buy into it, they'll do whatever. They'll make anything look good. I think for a long time in those first couple of years, I think the kids made me look good. My numbers were good, but that was just because they enjoyed being around for some reason. Sure. And it's like you have different things. Some of the boys just wanted... You started to find what things worked with what groups. So I would sometimes plan one session, and I remember I did this really early on because I'd had like 20 sessions a week. I'm like, I need to be smarter here with what I'm trying to do, but I had to plan every session because again, you don't have that library of like somebody goes this many players, and now you can make up so many things on the spot. But at that time I was like, no, I really want to know how many I've got, and just give myself the best opportunity. So I'd plan one session for the week. And I was like, it's up to me now to adapt it to every single group I've got. And those sessions would change so quickly because some of the boys were like, we just want a small side. We want some element of small-sided games. We have another group where they didn't really like the competition because a lot of them weren't very good and knew they kept losing. So with them, it had to be maybe a little bit more controlled, maybe a little bit more technical, because they enjoyed that because they didn't have to go into this race that they were like, oh, I'm going to lose that. And it was weird how you could do the same session, but every time you delivered, imagine delivering the same session 20 times in a week. How much it changes. Some days you'd be like, oh my God, I've thought of 2 different progressions. Now I'll add those to that. And then when I come back to the session in like a couple of months' time, I can add in, like your mind just keeps going. But I think you've just got to adapt it to what the players want. I think with a lot of coaches, they seem to think it's about them, and it just isn't. It's like, I might want to play a certain way. I might want to do a certain drill. I might really like, but if that's not what my players like or enjoy or benefit from, then why am I doing it? So I think you've always, even at academy level, I still come back to what do your players need, but how do you deliver it in a way that they would like to play it? I was the same kid when I finally got back to playing and I'd show up to training. I'd go to my coach and be like, please can we play a game? I want to play a 5-a-side. I love 5-a-side. Please can we play a 5-a-side? And he was just like, you're a grown adult who coaches as well. Why are you doing this to me? And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I just want to play a game where it's not the match day of the week where I have to give everything. I have to take it really seriously. So for me, I was always about some sort of small-sided. And that's a huge part of how I deliver stuff now, where everything will eventually come to some sort of 3v3. And I know at Coerver, like I did a lot of Coerver coaching. I did a lot of like some of the diplomas and stuff. And I had a big emphasis on how do you translate some of those small-sided and the ball mastery stuff into ways that are fun. So it's mad how you pick up things that work for you. But I would never deliver something that I never wanted to do as a player. And I'm probably, in terms of the way I am, probably the most annoying type of player, because I'm like, I just want to play a game and I want to do this.
Can we shoot? Yeah.
Yeah, can we shoot? Oh, crossbar. And, things like that. Like, that's who I was. But you just got so much joy out of it. So for me, and then I also, as a player, went into certain clubs and I was like, oh, I'm so bored. And I was like, I don't want to be that coach who makes football boring, regardless of what level we're at.
Sab, there's so much you said here that we need to unpack. Brilliant points. Okay. So firstly, how do you excite players? And which is informed by your experience as a player and your enthusiasm for that. You want to coach things that excite players. And I think that enables a connection, doesn't it? And an authority, really. We're going this way, you follow me, because the kids are with you. They're focused and they're with you. You also mentioned, I think what's very clear is your enthusiasm. And I think that if we can't have fun doing our job, coaching young people, I think probably you're in the wrong job. Like, you need to find another job. I mean, what an exciting thing we can do every day is coach young people. And I think often also your other point around sometimes it's not player centric. It's more maybe about the ego of the coach or their agenda. And I've made, I've been nervous, maybe big sessions we've done, and there's a lot of parents or other coaches watching. And you do want to do a good job, and perhaps you lose focus of, actually, this is more relevant for me than the player. And you talked about all that stuff. Attention coaches and players, introducing the new and improved Coerver Soccer app. It's called Coerver Soccer Skills. And we're very proud to be able to help you become a better player and coach, and fast. With expert-led drills, skills challenges and real-time progress, coaches will develop better practices that challenge and improve all of your players, regardless of their ability. Guess what? It's also easy to use and time tested, and the improved content that we've learned from over these 40 years can be prescribed for you so you can see your session plans, or you can create your own using the Coerver Session Planner. You'll save time and there'll be no more research needed for YouTube. You get 40 years of tried and tested know-how in the palm of your hand. Enjoy the app now, coaches. I want to ask you, Sab. So you mentioned sort of some of the architecture, some of the things you're thinking about in terms of the recipe of your sessions. If you're talking about advice for U12 boys coaches or U12 girls coaches, what do you think are the most important things they should consider? Also considering they've probably only got one session a week plus game day.
Yeah, of course.
What should they be doing in that session?
I think it's really important to focus on like the individual as much as you can.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and it's hard because I've been there where you get one session a week, but then you're focused on the game on a weekend. But I think
it's a difficult question, by the way, because there's so many things in play.
Hard, yeah. And I think you've really got to think about where your players are at and what they need. So there are some, and I think it also depends on, again, we come back to what do the players want. So are we in a session where some of them really want to progress on and develop their football careers, or are they just there for fun? Sure. And I think you've really got to make sure you understand the context that you're in, because there were some sessions I had where I was like, these kids don't want to make it pro. And I know that, not in a disrespectful way, but I think you've just got to appreciate who you're coaching and why. And then you tailor it to those specific things. But then if you've got serious players, I think the one thing that I've really really made clear this season with some of the 16s is their intent. So when we're working on whatever we're working on in that session, their intent is everything. So I will always praise that. Yeah. And I'll come back to some of the stuff that I've gone over this season. And obviously we've got the 16s who are looking to progress into the 21s, and then the 21s who want to be in the first team.
This is at Spurs, yeah.
This is at Spurs, yeah. And it's been the biggest thing that I've gone over with them is when you want to make it pro, everyone thinks you've got to have every step over, and you really I think even that's what I had when I was younger. Like you had to have all these skills, you had to be a Messi, but really you've just got to be consistent with the basics. And then and then if you've got all these other things in your locker, like your step overs, and you can ping a ball 50, 60, whatever your super strength is, but you come back to intent of, can you do the basics off both feet? Can you be really hard to beat defensively? Because defensively, that's a huge part of the game. And how do you make yourself irreplaceable? Well, you do the basics really well. So I think in my context right now, for me, I praise their intent. So whatever that I want them to do. So we've had a lot around using your left foot. I say left foot obviously we've got some left footers and then their weaker foot is right foot. But predominantly in the women's game, there's not a lot of left footers. So I'm always like, use your left foot, because you never know when, you need to use it.
Yeah.
And it's mad how many players I've seen make it at a high level, but you look at them and they're so one-footed.
Yeah.
But I said, you're already beating out half the players in the top level if you can use both feet. And we had somebody who tried to finish off her left and she's missed the target and she's gone, missed in front of it. That's exactly what I want. And she was like, what? I said, yeah, because it's gonna happen. If you can be brave enough to have the intent to do something that puts you out of your comfort zone, eventually it will come out. The hardest thing to build is the intent to do something that you're like, I don't want to do that and I'm gonna miss in front of everybody. I said, you know what's worse? If you reach with your right foot and it hit the outside of your boot and it went over, because I would have gone, should have used your left foot, which is just as frustrating to hear.
Yeah.
But
so you're even taking that more developmental approach at Spurs at the U16 level.
Yeah.
So you've got time to develop. We want you to develop. It's not results right now.
Yeah.
Take that left foot shot on because eventually it's gonna.
And now we're getting players who've got like, and it's mad. They'll finish off their left and they'll score and go, Sab, left foot. That's why. Because eventually you're going to do it without thinking and it's going to get better. Yeah. But the hardest thing to do is to start doing something. So like whenever you sit down with any player and go, you need to start doing this. And I know we're talking about weaknesses and I'll get onto strengths later, but in terms of weaknesses, it's like, I've sat down in every single IDP I had this season, I started off in the beginning of the season, you need to use your left foot more. Oh, okay. I said, that's not me being a lazy coach going, I haven't figured out anything else to do, so I'm just saying use your weaker foot. But I'm saying it, and then in training, what we do is we make sure there's enough opportunities to make sure that we've given you that space, that technical, to use both feet. And then it's like, we'll start with your first touch. Brilliant. Now we'll start with a 5-yard. Then we'll start with a 10-yard pass. Then if you get to 15, 20, and then we just build it. But as long as you can do the first touch, the 5 and the 10 yards, after that, you're not thinking about it. Then those bigger things can happen. But we do that every single session. There is a technical and there's that, right, go to your left. And if it's ugly, we'll just do it for a little bit longer. And if I've got to take off 5 or 6 minutes off something else, then I'll do that. But you got to prioritise in moments what your individuals need. Because for me, I'm also the 21s assistant and I know the gap. So for my whole job is not about the results on Saturday. It's about how many players will be retained. And I think as coaches, you've got to take responsibility. So if she can't do this and she's had a whole year, I've got to take some accountability as to why that hasn't happened. So I think you've really got to go back to what are your priorities within a session, within a season? And then you can start taking things day by day. And obviously the contact time makes a huge difference. I think when you're training with players 3 to 4 times a week, the difference and how much information you get out compared to that one. But I think you can get so much out of one session if the players individually know what they need to do. Sure. And I think you can keep it simple. It's mad how you think the detail comes in the layers, right? But fundamentally, the setup of the session, some of my setups are like, I haven't changed much. But what you're coaching, you can just change area sizes. There's so many things you do, but the layers will add on to like the individuals. Like if you're significantly better than the other player, and this is coming back to grassroots, what can I give you that gets you working on something in the same practice as somebody else? And you can do that. And you can do that, especially with 1v1 stuff, right? Where the focus week 1 might be, okay, attacking, how are we going to use that to create chances? And then week 2, it's on defending. What's the defensive position? How are you closing down space, etc. So same practice, 2 different objectives. Yeah. And then it's like, if you're really, like, I might not be very good at 1v1, like in terms of attacking, but then what can I do that could help me out in those situations? So I think you can just, and then if you've got some players who are really good, you pair them up with somebody maybe who's a little bit hot. You can do a lot of things, but give different players different instruction. Yeah. That's the art bit, right? Yeah. How you can, you the first thing you said was individual approach and an individual approach, and that opportunity to provide individual instruction, I think can turn a good session into a great session. And then it's like, if I've got something that I know I'm working on, and it's also like those little things of like your coach telling you something specific. I want you, I know you can do that. Can you try this? Yeah. And they're like, But you know what? You don't realise how much. I hear it sometimes from parents. They go, oh, you had a really nice conversation with so-and-so after the game. I went, yeah. But it's a conversation that I forgot because I've then gone on to speak to the next player and gone to my next squad because I'm juggling 2 squads. And they go, yeah, you had a really nice conversation with her post-training or post-game. And I'm like, God, yeah, I did. It took me 5 minutes and I've gotten on with my day. But for her, she's gone home and told her parents. Brilliant. And it's mad how much you get. But again, it comes back to how well do you know your players? So I think if you know them, then it always comes back to what do they need. And then you can have so much fun with how you deliver things. But I think it always has to come back to who are they and what do they need.
Sab, how do you think about, especially reference grassroots, I appreciate, but you were telling me before our pod that you take this approach even with the Spurs team in terms of balancing development versus performance or winning. From a grassroots context, how should coaches, and I feel very strongly about this, but how do you think coaches, because of course parents, there's pressure from parents and players to win games. How do you communicate to them that we're trying to develop and it's a journey? And have you got good sort of tips for coaches around that?
You know what? I think that's every coach's like nightmare. They're like, I've got to juggle everything that's not about the game, right? But I think the biggest thing that I've found is clarity. So I think if you can be really upfront and honest with all the parents to start with. Now, I know it's hard when you're like, oh, we're grassroots, coaches aren't full-time. I've been there, but there's nothing wrong in sending even just a message out to all the parents at the beginning of the season to say, this is what we're planning to do. So if you're looking at equal time, we will do equal time. Mm-hmm. But I think you've got to be really clear on when do you not do things like equal time, if that's something that you're going to do. Now, if you're looking at the really early ages of under 6s, under 7s, under 8, everyone should just play. Everyone should just have a good time. But I think when you hit, so for me with 16s, and I think I've worked with under 16s in a like various roles from elite to grassroots. And I've done it for quite a long time.
Boys and girls too, right?
Boys and girls, yeah. And I think for me, what I found was at 16s, there's got to be an element where we switch it and it's not just about development, because once you finish 16s, you're either going into a 21s or an 18s, or you're going to adult football. And you get to a point where you don't just get guaranteed minutes. And I think sometimes you need to show players and parents that there has to be ownership on, I deserve these minutes. Because what incentive is there for me if I come in every single training session early and I give it absolutely everything? And I'm not just talking about being the best. I'm talking about praising the right behaviours and the right attitudes. What do I get for being that good? Oh, the same minutes as this kid who keeps disrupting the session, if that is the case. It might not be. It might be that you have a great group of players. But I'm saying there's got to be rewards for certain things to say that takes you a long way, because that's not just football, that's life. I had a similar conversation. We had a trialist come in. We offered her like 4 weeks because she just loved the experience. She was a grassroots player, but her attitudes, the way she presented herself, how she showed up, how she engaged. And I had a conversation to say, look, unfortunately, we didn't take her on. But I said, the reason you got 4 weeks, the reason you got more time than anyone else is because your attitude was brilliant. And I made it very honest halfway through. I said, I'm just going to give you 2 more weeks to just come in, take as much out of the environment as you can, and then I'll help you with another club that you can get into, which will be significantly closer. But her attitudes to everything was so good. Why do you not praise that? Why do you not show players? And I made it so clear to them that if you show up like this in other environments, you will become a better footballer, but you will get further off than maybe somebody who is a better footballer than you, because things like that mean a lot in the long run.
So you used her as an example to the other players in the squad. At that time, you said, did you refer, like, guys, this is the standard of behaviour and attitude, or is that something you set out throughout the season, pre-season, etc.? Like, here's what's required.
Yeah, I do it quite early on. That was,
right.
In terms of like what I want from the group, the standards are quite clear. But I think when we're talking about, so with that, what I was trying to say is if you are maintaining certain standards, there has to be more accountability to then we're all playing the same minutes at 16s, because
Sure.
I think your next step doesn't necessarily give you that. Then you get to a point where you're like, I'm sat on the bench, and that's mentally, that's a really difficult thing to take. There's like, we've all been there, like as an adult, and you're like, I'm on the bench, and it's quite difficult. But if you've never had that, then that first experience becomes really difficult. So I think with the 16s, we've tried to balance it out where it's like everyone played the league games, but you have every chance at training to show up and show why you should be there, and I'm watching. And there's so many times where all my examples to players has not been from a game, they've been from training. And I'm like, I've asked you to work on, can you be brave to play forward? And at training you did it in that moment, because I praised it and I spoke to you about it after training. So don't underestimate your behaviours at training and your intent at training, because if you do it there, I'll play you on Saturday and you'll start. And then at the same time I go, the league games, I don't care, everyone plays. The cup games, you've got to earn them. But I'll tell you when the cup games are, because as soon as they get released, you've got 4 weeks now. Build it up at training, build it up at your Saturdays. And I've also had to jump in and sort of lead on some of the 21s. And I'm like, you can't come at me or anyone about what position you're playing and what minutes you're playing. You can't control that. What you can control is what you decide to do with it on the pitch. And if they're good, I'm going to look a bit silly then, aren't I? To be like, why didn't I keep her on the pitch? Or, why is she not starting the next game? So you've got to take ownership. And I think that's the biggest thing for young players as well, is I think we sometimes try to, and I don't mean this in a horrible way, where we try to protect everybody plays. And yeah, it should be that. But at what point do you then start going, tell me why, or show us why you deserve to start? Because there has to have that. That's how you get competitiveness at training as well. That's how you're moving around going, well, why is training so flat? Because I'm coming in going, doesn't matter because I'm playing on Saturday. Do you know what I mean? But when I knew I was like on the cuff of like, it could be me or it could be you starting in the same position, I'm like, I need to be better than you. And I remember doing that as a player going, I need to be better than her. I need to be better than her because I want to start Saturday. And you need an element of that, not in a horrible way, but that is football now. And the women's game is getting just as competitive. So I think you've got to now, in certain age groups, start feeding that in certain ways. I definitely agree with everybody plays in the early age groups, but I think as long as you're really clear to parents, I know I've sort of gone off on, I said I'd do this on a massive tangent, but I think you've just got to be really honest with the parents and say, this is what I'm trying to do, and I need you on side to make sure that we can do this together for these reasons.
Sab, you mentioned attitudes and behaviours. Can you talk about the key ones and how you communicate that to players and parents? What are the standards you're looking for in terms of behaviours and attitudes?
So I think it's more about how, I think it's like, this is where you want to be, and we're all, so I'm talking about like an academy environment now, in terms of like, if you want to be at first team, this is how the first team behave. This is how the 21s behave. So if you're sitting here saying you want to be in the 21s, this is how I expect you to behave. So whether it's accountability of like the kit, there's like a couple of things. There's like being on time. Obviously there's things like being on time. They're 16. If something's happened at school or parents are like juggling, so that's, I'm not going to be like, you're late. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of how we treat each other, I think that's a big one to me in terms of respect. I've gone on a lot about, you've got to be, if I make a mistake, I know that. How do I react to my mistake? But then how do you react to my mistake? So it's little things around that I think really help create a positive environment, that we're all happy to try things out, knowing that we're all trying things out and we will make mistakes. But as long as the intent again is there, that's fine. So as long as you're trying to do the things that I ask you to do. And then it comes back to the effort at training, that everything is as match intensity as it can be. And I think that's been the key thing to the under 16s having so much success this season. Everything has turned into a competition. Every pass is like life or death. Every goal is like, yeah, we're winning now get back in. And I've done a lot of games, and my preference across this age group, and not just academy, just all development, is having some sort of like chaotic game where as soon as you attack, there's a transition and then you defend, and it's one of those where
fast break attack.
But as soon as even if you've scored the goal of your life, you're running straight back into defend. Or if you're defending, you're turning that straight into an attack, and you're just thinking about what's next. So it's about making sure that we're always hunting. We're always going, I've scored, but now I need to go and defend. I've defended, now I need to go and score. And I think it's about making sure that we're always thinking about the next step. It's not that whole thing of, I've played you an unbelievable pass.
Watching it.
And we've all done it. We've all done it. But I think the biggest thing for me is like, I've obviously got to find whatever I can do to make sure that I'm getting the levels I want from the players, but I've made sure that can the players buy into why we're doing it. I found that it's really important, and maybe it's specific to the girls and the women's game, but I don't see why everyone wouldn't take to being told why they're doing something. So I banged on about, 1v1 defending. I banged on about first contacts on the ball. And I went on about this for months. And I even said my non-negotiable, every team talk before a game, my non-negotiable is there has to be pressure on the ball, 1v1. I don't care. If you have to jump out of position to get pressure on you, I will take your place if I can't get to the ball. But there has to be. That was the non-negotiable. And because it was like, there's not a lot of rules. There wasn't a lot. In possession, I'm a very big believer of like, you've got some players who are just special. You've got some players who, they find everyone plays football because they enjoy being on the ball. That's my take on why else would you love football? No one's coming into it going, I love defending. There are a couple. I'm not trying to, there are a couple and they're rare, but for the most part of it is everybody enjoys being on the ball. So I don't really need to coach the in possession. In possession and the sort of trade-off I had is out of possession, it's a non-negotiable on the 1v1s. In possession, we build to the attacking half. Free reins, just fill the box. My only thing on that was fill the box. But once it crosses the halfway line, so we've done our build, because the build was a huge part in the Spurs DNA this season. I said defensively, I'm going to hold you to this standard. If you do not defend, that's the only time that's when you're going to hear me shout. But get it into the attacking half and then enjoy it. But if we lose the ball, what's everyone doing? Running and defending, fine. And then you just let players do the things, and I think sometimes you've got to give them just free reins. Show us what you can do. And we've got some players who, they've got like, I've told them like, in possession, you're a joke. Like you can do all these things. And I'm thinking about some of the players I've had that conversation with. Yeah. You've got to be disciplined out of possession, because when you get to the next level, it's no longer good enough being the luxury player that doesn't defend. That doesn't happen anymore. The game's changed. Everybody defends. So I think for me, that's what it's been, is like with the standards and the non-negotiables, I've just been a couple of things, but I've made sure that everybody knows why. Yeah. And then once they started to do it, they started to see why we were doing it. But I spoke about it every week.
So your comms were consistent. So it was like, everyone's clear. This is what we do. This is what's expected. You mentioned intensity and competitiveness in your sessions and in the games. And I think this is a frequent question that we get from grassroots coaches all the time. How do we facilitate that in our sessions and games? Because sometimes, grassroots not up for it. I don't know, whatever is in play means that they don't have that intensity sometimes. Yeah. Have you got any tips, Sab, on how grassroots coaches can, I guess, incentivize competitiveness and intensity?
I think you've got it's weird. Like I've done different types of games and different types. Sometimes the technical turns into a competition if you've got two groups and, you get loads of practice. Yeah. And then it's like, right, if you've got some goals in there, or if you don't have access to mini goals and whatnot, and you can do like who can get through the first cycle the quickest. And I think like there's always an element, and I know whether you're playing a game or whatever it is, there's a way to go. You keep score. You do. I've got two things that I think I've used all season, and I can't believe how well they've worked. I've done, and again, this is how basic it is. There's like two groups. I'm in my box with my team. You're in your box with your team, and it's the first group to 30 passes. But like it's like a stop clock. So if we lose the ball and we're on 6 passes, ball gets transferred to you, then your clock starts, but we stay on 6 till we win the ball. And it has become the game of the season. We did it last night because it was the last day of training, and that doesn't count. And then I add on. I go, well, if you come into my box, win the ball, and transfer it, 3 passes. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's worth 3. But it's like you just got to find the games that they enjoy. Sure. And then you don't have to. Sometimes I get guilty of this. I want to change it up. I want to try something new, and I do that most weeks. But then sometimes you're like, there's some things that work really well, as long as you use it in the right moment and you time it well. That you get it. But they love that game. One time I was setting something up. They go 30 pass game, and I went, why am I setting something else up? Then I could have just done that. It's such an easy setup. But they love it. But then all I do sometimes is, if the physical loading that day is high, the boxes get further away. If the numbers are big, or if I want to work on maybe something, we might change how many can go and press. Yes. But do you see how they love that game, so they play it? And then the other thing, and I might have named it out of my own, like leaving some sort of legacy at Spurs behind. We've got the Super Sab Cup. Super Spurs, and I said it has to be named like 7 words, name it, but it has to be named after me. So the girls came up with it, and I did it once just for a joke. I said, you know what, I want them to have. It was an intensive day. Sure. We were in the dome, which is a little bit small in terms of dimension. So I went, we're going to go, and we had a huge turnout in terms of squad. Everyone was fit. We were like, something had just changed that moment of the season where we had just won a really tough game, and it felt like everything was starting to click and the morale was really high. And I went, tournament day, but I'm going to name it like the Sab Cup or something, because we were in the cup run. So I wanted them to, the purpose behind it at that moment was, how do you start looking at games to win them? So how do you go 4 teams of 4? I managed to pull in 4 goalkeepers, pulled every age group I could. I told Brad, our goalkeeping coach, we need 4 goalkeepers. He was like, right, okay, cool, I'll figure it out. 4 goalkeepers in, everyone in groups of 4. I made their teams. I said, team number, we bigged it up. And I couldn't believe. And also, you know what they don't get to do, I feel, as much in academy, maybe girls football, is they don't play in the cage like I did. They don't play at the park. So they don't just do, and I said, do whatever you want. You've got a Rabona and you do that. You want to attempt an overhead kick. This is your cup to win. And the football that we were playing, they're playing with freedom. I don't care if you're a centre-half. I don't care if you're a 9, play wherever you want. And you had our centre-halves scoring worldies, and it was the hype. All the staff were down there. They were like, what is happening? We just wanted to come in and see what the Sabs Cup was about, because everyone's like hyping this up. And it was unbelievable. And then the winning team, I said, you all stay together, because next month we'll play the cup. I blagged this. Next month we'll play the cup again. The winning team stays together, and I'll reshuffle all the other teams. And then the next month happened. When's the cup? Then the parents are gone, what have you done here? And now we have to do the cup every month. And then I got asked on a weekly, can we do the cup next week? I'm like, we just did the cup last week. No, I need to coach, because at some point somebody's going to come in and go, are you coaching, or are you just have you turned this into like small side? But the football and the confidence that we've gotten in possession, what they don't realise is we're effectively doing all the things that we're asking for in terms of that attack and defend quickly. And then I've changed it up every so often and gone, it has to be throw-ins, because I think the amount of times you lose possession on a throw-in, this became my fixation this season. All my MDT were like, oh, here Sab goes about a throw-in.
Do you throw back? Do you encourage to throw back and go the other way, Sab? Or how do you approach it?
A little bit now, but now I'm in 2 minds about it, because we did an in-house, and I had, and we named it after one of the players. I don't know if I can announce her full name, but we've called it after her. Her name's Libby. Somebody threw the ball in, and she's ran into this space, and while it's in the air on a volley, she's sweeped it over, and it's by the attack, just by the box. So she sweeped it over, and it's landed in the box for somebody to run onto, and that girl's hit the ball, and she scored. And we had filmed it, thankfully, and I went, that's it. So I clipped it, put it on analysis, and I said, does anybody remember the throw-in that I was talking? And I was quite, during the warm-ups and stuff, every so often I'd get Ryan, our PPC, let me see who has the biggest throw, because I really feel like we could do a little bit more with throw-ins, because if you think about it, you get more throw-ins than you do corners, than you do goal kicks, every other set piece, but we lose possession all the time. What is a foul throw?
I see it every weekend on the grassroots too, Sab, right? It's basically an opportunity to give the ball straight back to the other team. So we generally go back now to play the other way, because the percentages, I think, are high at the grassroots level. But sorry, go ahead.
No, but that's what you should do. And then I clearly I fixate sometimes on certain things.
Yeah.
As you can imagine. And then I kept talking to her. I'm like, we need to do the sweep. So then we came up with different, so in part of the technical, sometimes I like to do a lot of little bit, if the ball's in the air, little bounces, are you using your right and your left foot, different types of finishing, because I think that's how you finish in the box. And then I started going, I watched that throw in, and I went, we're going to show them. And I'm going to say in some moments in training. So every time you go into small-sided now, I always utilise throw-ins, because I think it's really important to do it so you can practice. And then we've tried to work the sweep. So yesterday we had an under-17s under-17s game. So what we did was we had the first year 21s and the second year 16s playing together as a transition group. So I was leading on that. And one of my under-16s, the throw-in came in, and her muscle memory, she tried to do it. It didn't quite pull off, but the moment she chose in terms of her run and the area of the pitch, I went, oh my God.
That's what you're looking for.
She tried to do it. And I went, she tried to, and then I looked at her and I said, you tried to do it? And she's like, oh, it didn't work. I said, do it again. And she was like, okay. But I was like, it's mad, because I think you can be so much, you can give them a little bit more creativity. So even in those small-sided, I'm like, when the throw-in happens, recognise where you are on the pitch, or if we're doing the cup and you're trying to get a goal in, how could you possibly use that? Just like you would a free kick, just like you would a corner. And you give them a little bit more about what they want to do with it. And then I said, look, if it's in our own half, now you've got to be a little bit smarter. You can't do the sweep there, because it's too high risk. Okay. So I think what we tried to do now is just go, there's so many opportunities. Are they thinking about what is going on? And then they always laugh. They go, Sab's got another idea. Sab's got another idea. So and they all get a little bit worried. I go, so I have an idea, and they go, oh no, because the way it started was I would play everybody in different positions, because when I showed up and they were like, this is your squad and these are the positions, if if I show you what I was given and how we've ended, it's so different. But
yeah.
I think what's really important as well, and I know we talk about grassroots and academy, I think up until 16s, they don't need a primary position. You've got to just make them good footballers. So I'll come back to, what do you see as a good footballer? So for me, it is working off, but from my experiences and what I've seen at the top level, I'm like, both feet, being hard to beat, being able to just have the mentality to run, and having the intent to want to compete. So I think for me, I've got a bunch of characteristics that I know could get you to the top level as a good footballer. So it might be that in my system, you play as a centre mid, but you go up and then you get called up by the first team manager and he goes, yeah, you're right back. That is going to happen to so many people. So I think the amount of players, and I saw the panic in parents, you can imagine early on where you go, what do you mean she's playing as a right back now? What do you mean I said, just trust the process. If you trust me, and if it's wrong, I'll put my hands up. And I think you've got to be able to give them that honesty that I could get this wrong, but thankfully I didn't. But when you get it right, everyone's buying is like, I'll do whatever you tell me to.
Yeah. It reinforces that authority and experience that you've got. Now, Sab, you talked about the Sab Super Cup, right? And I think
everyone at Spurs is going to rip me for this because they're like, you don't even care that you won a trophy this season because you've named a cup after yourself.
But what you've done, and I think this is directly applicable to the grassroots, is you found a way to excite players. Yeah. You found a way to disguise the work that you want to do by, something creative.
Yeah.
I think always back to, if we do like a small-sided game or little like multi-tournament thing in our grassroots level, we wouldn't have team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. We'd have Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal and Tottenham.
Yeah.
And then, kids are like, oh, I'm Barcelona.
Yeah, exactly that,
You're just looking for the creative ways where kids, again, buy into it a bit more. And Sab, you've come up with loads there, and I think that those are completely transferable and relevant for grassroots as well.
Yeah.
Now, listen, firstly, I'd like to give you an open invite to come back again because we are running out of time, and we have covered quite a lot of what I wanted to.
I don't even know if we covered what you wanted. I just started talking, and I was like, oh, here we go. I'm just on my little post-season rant.
We need to go again, please. We need to have another pod, but I want to end up, Sab, because I think you've got brilliant experience at the grassroots, amazing experience at the pro level. The sky's the limit in terms of where I truly believe that where your career's going, and it's currently culminated in your experience at England.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, well, first, I guess, what that felt like to coach at that level, and also anything you think's relevant that grassroots coaches could learn from your experience there? Any direct sort of takeaways that you think are relevant?
100%. And in terms of the England stuff, my biggest thing is I was in a position just before the England stuff where I was looking at hiring coaches. I think there's so much about chasing badges, and I'm so grateful to be on my A. Like, without a doubt, it's a dream come true because I never thought that was a level I would achieve. But I think what people don't appreciate is you just got to get out there and coach. You've got to it's the same thing with the players. You've got to do all the ugly sessions to get to a point where you're like, okay, you've got to do your graft, because that comes from your prep. That's all your preparation, because those moments will happen if you show up and in the right ways. So I come back to all the things I spoke about in terms of standards for players. I think it's the same for yourself. It's the same journey for coaches, where you've got to put hours in. You've got to have some horrific days where you go, oh, that was bad. And we've all had them. And I used to think it made me a horrible coach, but I look back at some of those now and I go, okay, you know what? It's put me in. Everybody goes through it, and I think the more I was at one point, I didn't want to share that with anybody. I was like, it's hard enough being the only female coach that I can see. I don't want to say that I wasn't good, or And I struggled with confidence as a player, as a coach, in a number of ways. But I think what you don't appreciate is all those hours. They really, really add up to your confidence levels, to how easy you can adapt. Because I'd love to say that you get to England and Spurs and stuff, and you don't have to adapt. Your players have dropped. How have I've only got 8 players now because the 21s have taken whatever, or she's injured. It happens at England. But in terms of the opportunity there, I applied for a placement and they offered me a 16s camp. And the night before, I was like, what am I going to tell England players? They're all going to be better than me. What am I going to coach an England player? And I got there and realised, you need to receive that on your back foot. Why haven't you shifted that on? And it's mad how... But my first thought was, because I was like, it's an England call-up. Yeah. And they were telling me about the squad selection. They were like, these 4 have never been to an England camp. I'm like, I've never been to an England camp. I feel just as they do. So I took every moment within that. And I was so fortunate to have a head coach, John, who has been, like, in terms of taking a chance on people, it was him, and then he had an assistant coach, Abby, and I came in as a third to do my placement, and I helped out at SGP. So that was a whole experience in itself. And then he called me back. He said, we've got another camp. It's international. It's in Finland. We definitely need extra hands. Would you do it? And I was like, but on my first camp, I remember he was still getting me involved in some of the smaller group stuff. I just thought I was going to observe and help set up and stuff. But I think when you do all the basics right, when you're always helping out and you're bringing whatever you can, yeah. You get, in a way, he's like, oh, why don't you do this? And I was like, oh. And I remember the night before I knew I might be delivering a little bit, I went, it was something I've done so much, because I was like, I'm not going to try anything new here. I'm going to do something that I know will work, and I've seen the players and I've seen this. But I was like thinking about it so much. So it like you still get to those points.
But you've done the work, Sab. Think about where you started, those sessions in Dubai, and 20 sessions, and then how it culminated. You've done the work. You were ready. You might have been nervous, and that's completely that's natural. But you were ready. You were prepared.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes from your prep. So I think the best thing was for me in that situation is I had somebody who was willing to take a chance on me.
Yeah.
But that first camp, oh my God, I remember on the first session, so we were just meeting up, all the players were coming in to register, and John goes to me, he goes, oh, can you pass the ball? Because he showed me that I knew the practice. He goes, oh, I need a server. And I was like, yeah, I can ping a ball. And then I went, and I got the pitch dimensions wrong. I thought it was a half pitch. It was actually 3/4. So I was like, oh my God, I got to whip out a 30, 40 yard pass. Do I still have that in my locker? And I remember I was playing it, and that was my first moment of the camp, and I was like, if I mess any pass up here, so everything was so much pressure, but they were all basic things that you've done. I know how to pass a ball, I know how to deliver but you still in those moments feel nervous. And I remember pinging balls, and then a couple of the girls came up to me and go, did you used to play? And I went, yeah. And I was like, okay, now I've got a little bit, they're impressed. I can relax a little bit. They're already taken to me. But I think it came from just the players liking you, the same things that didn't change when I started as a coach. But like they all came out because it was the same things. I didn't change who I was. I didn't need to. I just had to trust that if I just let the players warm up to me and the staff. And that was the same reason why John was like, come to the next camp. And then fortunately, he was like, he's been called up to be the 17s head coach for a Spain prep camp, which was a joke, by the way. It was the best thing I've ever done. And then round one of the Euros, and he goes, I need an assistant coach. But because of the two camps where I was just a third coach, just doing my thing, he was like, I need an assistant coach. And I went,
that was your opportunity.
But that's when I actually delivered. That's when I was like part of like observing, setting up Spain as an opposition. Then I was like setting up Netherlands as an opposition, and I was doing all these other things and managing. And it's like from that first camp to the fourth camp that I did, I was like, that was in the space of 6 months. So it's how quickly things can change. But if you show up with the right standards and the right attitude, your preparation is that's half the work.
There's a lot to unpick there, Sam. I think if I could, I'd just take something practical, because one of the questions we get most asked by grassroots coaches is the warm-up before a game. And I'd like to ask you, from your time at England, is there any advice of maybe a drill, maybe you could explain it, or a topic, or maybe it's something you say in preparation for match day? This could be a U12 grassroots girls side. How to look at that sort of 20 minutes before the game, half an hour before the game. Obviously, people are typically getting there probably half an hour before a game. Yeah. Is there any advice you'd give, informed by your England experience, that could help people prepare to get started quickly in games at the grassroots level?
So for me, that's a huge one in terms of, like, I feel like the warm-ups, everyone thinks like they got to be really long. I think we had it timed to like 25 minutes with the ball. It was like
intense.
I had a little card that had the timings, and I'm talking like doing this at 03 to 07. Like, you've got 4 minutes to do a little pairs passing pattern. That was it. So like they were very meticulous with time. But I still think as long as it's something that's actually relevant, nothing really changes. We always get touches on the ball, you do some sort of possession, and you do some sort of breakout with the attackers and the backline. That never changes. But I still believe the biggest thing is your team talk, because that's a huge thing to me at Spurs. That not even Spurs. That's always been a huge thing for me generally, is the players have got to want to play. So I think as a coach, I think it's really important that you take. I know for me, I know what I'm going to say in the build up to every game before that game. I'm like, these are the couple of things that I'm going to focus on. And it might be something to do with what you've worked on at training, depending on what you want your outcome to be. But my biggest thing is you've got to get everybody riled up, ready to play, because I think the last thing you want it to be is flat. I think at England, you've got like we talk about motivation, they're all there to play for England. What more motivation do you need than that? But I think when you look back at the weekly games where we're playing a boys league, how do you get them riled up for that? You're playing grassroots, and maybe you're going through a tough time and you're bottom of the league. I used to coach a university team, and we started this thing off where me and the captain were talking. We're like, we always start horrifically. So what I introduced, and there was no training behind this, there was no tactical information. I went, we're introducing a 10-minute press. For the first 10 minutes, you just press. There was no plan on a press. The press just meant just get at them because the other team's not going to be great anyway. And they all bought into a 10-minute press. So the first 10 minutes, we started games so well. We started scoring in the first 10. But you can do so many things, but you've got to get your players riled up, ready to go with that.
With simple instruction too, right, Sab? You're not overloading them with information, complex information. It's kind of direct and simple.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's how I speak where I'm here. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but good. It's genuinely I think people appreciate being genuine and being honest. And I think you come back into half times and stuff. It's the same sort of thing where I'm like, if I have to call you out on something as a group and say it's not good enough, I'm happy to do that. But I think if they buy into you, they want to play for you. Yeah. And when you say things aren't good enough, they go, oh, okay, yeah, fair. I'm gonna pick it up. And I think that comes from just the relationships that you build. Sure. And again, it comes back to knowing your players and knowing that they need maybe a little bit more. Some are a little bit more. They need more tactical information. But then you look at others where I'm like, I trust them tactically, so I don't need to go through that. We worked on it all training. You know what I need from you today is show up and play. So whatever it is, I think you can gauge it every week in terms of, are your numbers lower? Do you have enough subs? Is everybody thinking about the fact that there's one sub today? So I think you've got to play it in terms of, if that's you sat there, what do you need to be told to go out there and get the best out of you? So brilliant. I think it's always just come back to what your players need.
Brilliant. Sav, thank you. Thanks for being with us. Really enjoyed the chat and look forward to the next one. Thank you.
No, sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sav.